Morning, students. In the last part of the chapter, the French Revolution, we'll be going to cover the topics like rule of directory, rule of Napoleon Bonaparte, abolition of slavery, role of women in French Revolution, and the ultimate consequences of the revolution at last. At the end, again, I'll be attaching a slide of worksheet questions, which you have to do as you are doing it earlier also. So now, students, after the end of Maximilien Robespierre, France government changes for the third time since 1789, and that was that time when Directory ruled France. In the next slide, we will see that how this Directory worked in France and what happened that Directory's rule also abolished in France and Napoleon Bonaparte came to power. So students, from this slide, we'll see that how Directory ruled France. The fall of the Jacobean government allowed the wealthier middle classes to seize power. And we all now understood very well that Jacobean government was actually the government of the people of uh, poor sections of the society, right? So now, again, the wealthier middle class seized to power. A new constitution was introduced which denied the vote to non-propertied sections of society. This right was granted by Republic under Maximilian Robespierre. But now again, as the wealthier middle classes seized power, they again denied the voting power to non-propertied sections of society. That means they wanted the voting power, voting rights only in the hands of the rich community. So now it provided for two elected legislative councils. These two elected legislative councils ultimately appointed a directory, an executive that was made up of 5 members. This directory was meant as a safeguard against the concentration of power in a one-man executive as it was under the Jacobeans. As you remember earlier, that Maximilian Robespierre came to power and he started behaving as dictator. But now this time again something happened, like the directors often clashed with the legislative councils who then sought to dismiss them. Now, because of all these things, because of all these clashes between the directors and the legislative councils, the political instability of the directory actually paved the way for the rise of a military dictator whom we all know as Napoleon Bonaparte. So now students will be going to study about rule of Napoleon, a famous warrior, a famous soldier throughout the world history, how he ruled France and how his rule came to an end with the Battle of Waterloo. Now students, we will see that how Napoleon ruled France as an emperor. Napoleon was an army chief under King Louis XVI. He crowned himself Emperor of France in 1804 after the end of Directory rules. As modernizer, he set out to conquer neighboring European countries, disposing dynasties and creating kingdoms. Basically, Napoleon was not a believer of democratic system. He actually was working as a dictator, although with some liberal norms, but still he was ruling as a dictator only. He introduced many laws such as the protection of private property, and the best uh, uniformity which he bring for in the economy of France was the uniform system of weights and measures which were provided by the decimal system, the actual system of weights and measures which we also used in our present time. Initially, many saw Napoleon as a liberator who would bring freedom for the people, but soon the Napoleonic armies came to be viewed everywhere as an invading force. Definitely, Napoleon was a very good soldier, a very great warrior, and that's why he started defeating the other neighboring countries, and that's why his armies were actually came to be viewed as an invading force only. From this slide, you can see that Napoleon actually restored the economic, the social, the legal, the religious order in France. But yes, along with all the special orders, he also had some sort of he also had taken some sort of negative actions also. And because of all these actions which I mentioned in the slide, you can see, okay, because of all these negative actions, he was finally defeated at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. World's oldest trade was slave trade, and it was majorly practiced in European countries. As France was a part of European continent, it was also involved in slavery. Slavery means slave trade. So now students, in this section we'll see that how slave trade was practiced in France and when and how it was abolished. The slave trade began in 17th century in France only. French merchants sailed from the ports of Bordeaux or Nantes from France to the African coast, where they bought slaves from local chieftains. Africa was a major center always for every European country for slaves. In Caribbean, they were sold to plantation owners. Throughout the 18th century, there was little criticism of slavery in France. Reason behind? Because there was the rule of monarchy, and monarchs under king and nobles, they actually believe in slave trades. The National Assembly held long debates about it, but it did not pass any laws, fearing opposition from businessmen whose income depended on the slave trade. Finally, in 1794, when Jacobean government came under Maximilian Robespierre, and if you remember, they were the people of weaker sections of the society, and that's why they were staunch opponents of slave trade. They abolished slavery in French colonies. But when Napoleon Bonaparte came to the throne, he was a monarch, and definitely he was a staunch believer of slave trade. He believed in slavery. So again in 1804, when Napoleon came to the throne, he reintroduced it. Finally, in 1848, slavery was abolished in France. Students, every society is made up of men and women, and France was also not different from it. So we cannot ignore the role of women in French Revolution. So let's discuss about it. From the very beginning, women were active participants in the revolution. In order to discuss and voice their interests, women started their own political clubs and newspapers in which they expressed their views, their needs, their wishes related to revolution. From the very beginning, they demanded the right to vote, to be elected to assembly, and to hold political offices, as they were always ignored uh, to give any political rights, to give right to vote for the selection of National Assembly or for the Directory or during the reign of Napoleon. So during Jacobean regime, the government made schooling compulsory for all girls. Their fathers could no longer force them into marriages against their will. Divorce was made legal. But it was finally in 1946 that women in France won the right to vote. Now students, we reached to the end of the chapter. Now it's very important to discuss the consequences or the results of the revolution, which was very famous throughout the world history. Now, the most important result of this revolution was it actually abolished censorship, feudalism, and it ended all the privileges based on birth. The Declaration of the Rights of Men and Citizens guaranteed freedom of speech and expression and equality in the eyes of law. The revolution inspired the people from all over the Europe and Asia. People in colonies were re-energized and launched movements to gain freedom, and India was also a part of it. Tipu Sultan and Raja Ram Mohan Rai were two examples of individuals who responded to the ideas coming from French Revolution. Church lands were bought by the middle classes. It actually ended feudalism, that's why the lands of nobles were confiscated. And the most important impact of French Revolution was the term nation. Now, very proudly, we all say that we are a part of this nation or we are a part of that nation, but the term nation, that came from French Revolution. It means that it is not the territory that people belonging to it occupy, but it actually comprises of the people themselves who were living in it, who were a part of it. And French Revolution gave us that proud feeling, that proud name, that we are nation. So student, this worksheet is from the topic which we have discussed. You need to do the questions given in that worksheet, and in case of any problem or query, you feel free to ask. Thank you. Take care. Stay at home. Bye bye.